listening to Jesus. And this is not going to work, Casey, so you're going to have to move on the slides for me, and we'll have the next one now. Maybe we're not going to have any. I know you're sick of hearing this. Oh, there we go. But we do practice. And we practiced yesterday afternoon and everything worked perfectly until this morning. And now we don't know, but we'll keep at it and try and find out what goes wrong. Anyway, this is what Jesus might want from you for Christmas. I think he's right for the sandals, and but an ear. Maybe not, shouldn't say for Christmas, but all the time. He's looking for your ear, your listening ear. Not to whisper sweet nothings in there. Some of the older people know that expression, do you? Whisper sweet nothings. Generally means, I think, some romantic sort of things that are nice, but they don't last. Well, I hope it lasts for romance, for couples and so forth. But to whisper sweet somethings. And I was trying to think of some other word to expand on that, and I just put some exclamation marks after really something. Jesus wants to get your ear, to speak into it. So he speaks into your life. All that he has, and we've just been singing that wonderful song, Meekness and Majesty, in the description of the splendour and the glory of who he is. And he so humbly, meekly comes, we look at in Revelation, knocking on the door, wanting to come in and open our... These are just pictures, but they are meant for us to apply them in reality. He wants to open our ears so that we listen. Okay, the next slide, and we'll just go through our reading, which is very short. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. This is the first... all these stories and events in the life of Jesus have so much to say to us. And here was a lady that was prepared to open her home to him. It's good in the church, in the church family. We often have people that open their homes to others for all sorts of ministry, and it's great. I know Pastor John and Robin over there, they've got a pretty open house, and it's often because of that it's a pretty full house. But it's a blessed house. And they have been blessed and been a blessing in opening their home. So that's a good start. And we can say open our heart, open our life, whatever it is. Are we open to Jesus? There are so many people that are closed to Jesus today, and they're closed because children have been abused in the name of the church, and also Christians in their neighbourhood are behaving badly, and there's just all the sorts of reasons that attack people, and often there's not a lot of openness. Very much up to us. Jesus said, "You'll be my witnesses." That's what'll do it. The only way to overcome faults is to produce and exhibit the truth in life. So Mary was prepared to open her home. Let's remember, as we look at the text there, it was Jesus and his disciples. You can add that up and see if you would like them to drop in on you this afternoon, the travelling band. So she had a job on, didn't she? Martha had a job, and it was her house. But as we go through the story, we find her reception on this occasion anyway doesn't go so deep. And the question every individual has to ask, whether it's the people that are saying, no, we're not interested in Jesus, we don't want to be open to him, who'd want to be? And down to, you've been a Christian for 50, 60, whatever years, we've got people here like that today. The question we need to ask is, how deep is our reception now? How open are our ears to Jesus? And we're going to contrast Martha's reception with the reception of Mary on this occasion. I want to say that because we don't have time to go through, but if you read very carefully the Gospel, Martha's not that, the bad woman. Martha, we find in other places, is at the feet of Jesus. And all sorts of things we find about Mary and Martha. So we don't give her bad press here, but we just, on this occasion, we want to contrast what happened in their reception. And we'll have the next slide, thanks. So we find in the midst of it all that Mary is the one who's sitting at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. Sure, it's an attitude of worship, but her aim, her desire there was to hear what he said. She'd heard things he'd said before, and she'd come to value what he said. She'd come to know that her heart needed to hear through Jesus from God. She had a sister called Mary, and she sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. We've had outlined for us the various ways we considered his feet today. Positioning for listening, you could entitle it. Are you in a good position for listening? Okay. Would you accept an invitation to Mary's house to grab an opportunity to be in the presence of Jesus? Would you? Of course you would. Okay, I don't want little half nods. Yes, we would. Or sometimes we say, well, would we? Would we really? Would you consider it a duty or a delight to go? Would you be keen to hear what he had to say and what he might even say to you personally? On that day, Mary was sitting right at his feet, I think getting as close as she could. Because of all the disciples were there, we can't be sure, it just says Jesus and his disciples, would have been a crowded little room. But she wanted to be close. We can do it, as Jeanette reminded us. We can do it. The words that passed Jesus' lips 2,000 years ago are still the same. Even though 2,000 years has passed, they still mean the same. They still contain the same promises, but just that we can't see his feet or his face. But if we pray and we read and we meditate, we can still hear him speak the word of light and truth. That word still has that power if we come. But we need to come in faith, to believe that God is and that he rewards those who diligently seek him, and that Jesus is his son, and that he's present. All these things Jesus has said, I am with you. And when you come to your word, then he is with us. So listening positions at his feet, as it was for Mary, and at his feet as it is for us, as we, especially the Gospels, but all the Bible, look at him. You can go on a journey every day. Again, the same problem. If Jesus turned up at your door, or one of his disciples or somebody said, come from the Baptist church and said, if you come down and meet at the church in the morning, Jesus has promised he will be there and we can go with him for the day. Would you do that? Yeah. But we need to take our faith and say, yep, we want to come and see what Jesus did on this particular day and what he said and just how he acted, all those things we can hear if we will listen. But it's with faith that we open the ears of our mind and our heart and our spirit as we ponder his words. So, next slide, thanks. We've already had outlined to us by Janet that as we go through our day, and this is just a picture these are actors, these fellows, and reminding us that as we walk through the day, as they walked along the way, there's so much teaching, if you read in the Gospel, that happened on the road. What a time! They had hours together walking. Better than driving in a car. Hours. Could have been hot and dusty at times and thirsty work. They had hours walking, and Jesus, being the teacher he was and is, grabbed every opportunity to share with them who his Father was, what his Father expected, and to direct them where they were getting off the track. Walking along the way, we need to, throughout the day, we can stop and listen even though our Bible isn't right there. Because we have a promise, don't we, of the other Comforter, one like me, literally, who will bring to our minds everything that he has said. So along the way, next slide, thanks. Oh, before we go, I just, doesn't matter, you saw that slide. He looks a pretty rough character, the man in the middle of there who's depicting Jesus. But you know, that's more likely what it was. In those first couple of slides, you might remember, Jesus looks quite handsome, a nice smooth face, and lots of times we like those pictures of Jesus. But that's probably more what it was like. And we need to remember he became flesh, and yeah. Okay, let's move on. We're back to... This one's just that along the way too, we have all sorts of things happen, and sometimes there's despair, isn't there? If you've walked through this life and you haven't struck despair, that's amazing. Sometimes there's despair, and it's hard to listen in despair, isn't it? But we need to. We need to grab that faith, and we need to take hold of quotes from the Psalms or anywhere that reinforce to us Jesus can speak. I want to hear what this despair has to tell me. We all struggle with that. We just want to get it over. We want to get out of it. Lord, change it. And we'll see some of that attitude happening. So what we've been stressing is the listening. And can we have the next slide? Thanks. So however, wherever we listen, we must in faith prayerfully take the time, make the space, give the attention to listening, because he is the only one authorised by God to speak uniquely and solely God's truth. It's going to cause a fight amongst religions today, but he's the only one. We have to accept, if we're called bigoted, they're not always lead to God. The Bible doesn't tell us that. Christ leads to God. Only through me can you come to the Father. And on this momentous occasion for the disciples, the cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him." And we need to have that echoing in our minds and our hearts as we embrace life and go through it. Peter reminded us too, the disciple Peter, he said, "You alone have the words of life." When Jesus said, "You're going to leave," because Jesus was speaking stuff that was hard to understand. You find things hard to understand that Jesus has spoken? I do, still. But Jesus said, "Well, you're going to go too." The others couldn't cop it, because he said, I'm the bread and I'm the wine, I'm flesh, and unless you eat me and drink me. But Peter said, "Where can we go? You alone have the words of life." Intentional, focused, prayerful listening with faith. With faith. You can't do this without remembering it takes... Faith is believing that God has said and doing it and seeing the results. You won't see the results without the faith, without being prepared to say, yep, all that's been revealed to me thus far, even though I can't see it clearly today, I believe, and I'm going to practice it. And thanks, Jeanette, she made the point, listening that doesn't have an aim of understanding and knowing what's being said so you can do it, isn't faith. Okay. Distractions to listening, we need to think about that. We do it quickly this morning, but it's a daily, lifetime exercise of checking your life for distractions to listening to Jesus. As we said before, Martha did have a big job. She was preparing for a lot of people. Now, my wife likes to receive people into her home and to cook. And sometimes I say, dear, it's not about the food, it's about the fellowship. And I don't want to rain on her parade, but there needs to be a balance. And so Martha was serving. It's interesting that the word for serving here, serving and the work, in both cases, is the word from which we get deacon for the church, and that's all it means. Any business that is exercised in order to benefit others in the New Testament is a diakonos, to service. And she was doing a good thing. That's why don't knock Martha. Somebody had to do it. And she was doing it, I know, out of love. And she was doing it out of wanting to draw close to Jesus too through her service. You heard about the love languages, you read the book? For some it's serving, for some it's being affirmed, all these things. I'm sure Martha's love language was serving, and we don't want to knock it. Okay, but the distractions. Ponder distractions to the church. I'll start there. And I'll just ask a question that you can throw in there and you can think around it. Do programs in the church take the place of listening? That happens, I believe. I believe churches can get so wrapped up in the programs. And they want to do it. They want to do it for the Lord and they want to do it to reach out. But they're so wrapped up in the programs and everybody's stressed. But something's gone wrong there. It's not the way it is. Jesus was never stressed in all the ministry that he had. Or do programs take the place of listening, or do programs come from listening? That's the ideal, isn't it? If we're listening and the programs come out of that, they're going to be the Lord extending his work in today, extending his work for his kingdom. And of course we need to apply this down to the personal level, because churches are made up of people. And it's important, and somewhere in here in the notes, but I'll throw it in now because it seems to fit, we need to pray for the leaders in our churches. And locally, because we're going into a change, we have an eldership, these elders need to be listening people. They need to have the courage and the faith to listen and say, God has spoken to us, and this is where we should go. We really do. And that's not easy to do for a person. Elders don't become some other super being, or pastors don't become some other super being. They may have some training and some gifting in the areas, but they're still people. And we need to pray for our leadership. If we want Christ to be the head of this church or any church that you belong to, you need to pray for leaders that will come and be part of the process where he is enthroned, actually enthroned, as the head of the church. Okay, there are products of distractions to listening. The one we better touch on the personal one, is love of the world. Not only does stress from work and stress from other things come, but pleasure becomes a distraction, a real distraction that gets in the way of us stopping to listen, wanting to hear from Jesus. I don't know what slide we're up to now. Yeah, Martha was distracted, and we'll have the next one. Now, here's an important part. One of the effects of distractions to listening is this. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." And as I said, the work again is this word that we get deacon from. It's a service and a waiting. I want you to consider another occasion on which people challenge Jesus on caring. Just grab hold of now anyway, the presumption of that. Don't you care? Accusing God of not caring. The world does that. And sometimes we do, and in our subconscious we're feeling that he's not caring. Another occasion, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And there were also other boats with him, and a furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. I would love to be like that, in the midst of every storm. Well, I could be. I can sleep pretty well these days. But I generally don't sleep when the storm's on. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" I know that in principle I do this and I've done this, but it does make me feel sad. And to hear them saying to Jesus, "Don't you care that we drown?" They've got a long way to go yet in learning who he is. So Martha was distracted by the stress of serving. The disciples were distracted by the stress of the fear of drowning. And they came up with these effects. Next slide, thanks. Distractions can be disastrous in living, can't they? In everyday life. Can you picture that? Can you picture what might be there? There might be blood on the road, there might be a young life gone. And you say it's exaggerated, well, it may be a little, but not much. That's one form of in our daily life striking distractions. But distractions for us, not to listen to Jesus, distraction for anybody, not to listen to Jesus. Whether it's the off-putting behaviour or whether it's the current philosophy of life or whatever it is, can have disastrous consequences, can't they? For time and for eternity. Distractions cause wrong choices and develop in us different attitudes so that we can say, "Lord, don't you care? And Lord, what I want you to do something about this. Tell her to help me." We accuse him of not caring, and we tell him how to care. And the presumptuousness of that, if I stop and think about it. But these distractions sideline us from listening to Jesus, and the roar of distracting stress and the siren call of pleasures to be enjoyed roar in the ears of our minds and hearts and souls and spirits and drown out the still small voice that says, "Take the time to listen." Distractions, whatever their cause, keep us from listening. Now, next slide, thanks. They're still awake up there. They had a big night, the younger people, sleep over and then a garage sale, and they're up there working. That's good. Right, products of distraction. Distraction led Martha and the disciples to make accusations. They accused Jesus of forgetting to care. They instructed the Lord, especially Martha, as to what he should do to show he cared. Wake up. Do you ever feel that Jesus has forgotten to care for you and he's gone to sleep as far as your boat's concerned? We can feel that way, can't we? But not if we listen faithfully and make it such a practice of our life. And we remember who he is. The Bible tells us he's the good shepherd who cares for the sheep. And the New Testament all throughout says he is the Lord. He knows how to care, and he cares his way. With the psalmist we may wonder, we can have the next slide, we may wonder about why God cares. Lord, what are human beings that you care for them? Mere mortals, that you think of them. They are like a breath. Their days are like fleeting shadows. We may wonder, but how can we ask? The next slide, thanks. Don't you care? How can we ask? With our knowledge, we really can't, can we? Whatever else has gone wrong and we can't understand it all, we need to just look again and say, you do care. You do care. And Jesus cares for the essential best. Now you've heard that. If you've been in church for all, you've heard it over and over, and sometimes you go, oh, not again. He does know what's best. And his timing is never wrong. And he has a reason, a purpose, sometimes for allowing our weakness. Paul said, when I am weak, then he is strong. I don't like it. I don't like that process, really. But it's a fact. When he just bashes me around the ears and everything goes wrong, I don't like it, but it's true. When I'm at the end of myself, then he can begin to do what he does best. He cares. But it challenges our perception of how we should be cared for. And in our humanity, in our thinking, that would be the last thing. We don't understand the depth of the effects of sin on our lives for time and eternity. But he did. And that's why he hung there. That's why he rose again. God raised him again. That's why he's returning. He understood completely our need. And he cared. But it does challenge our perception. We want to be cared for in the way we think it should be. And if it's not happening, we can develop a bit of angst and anxiety. Peter says in 1 Peter 5, humble yourselves therefore, that's the next slide, thanks, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he... Yeah. In the midst of anxiety, sometimes it's so hard to see the care happening. And we start crying out directions. Just do this. I need this. Don't you see I need this? Many find it hard to cast all your anxiety on him. I'm one of them. It is an essential exercise, but that by prayer and faith we are going to listen to hear Jesus say to our minds, hearts, souls and spirits, fear not, and peace be still. Got to listen. Okay, it may be hard, but listen, in the Old Testament, next slide, thanks. The Lord is good and a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust him. So, our next slide, Jesus answers Martha's challenge to remember to care with these words. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Some Bible students reckon this refers to the number of courses that Martha was putting on. Yeah, but they have their reasons, reasonable reasons for that, and it's a play on words, but only one. You only need a simple meal. And isn't that where we get into trouble so often? We can't keep it simple. What is it? K-I-S-S. Some of those who know that one. I won't say it. We have trouble keeping it simple. We feel that to impress God or to whatever, we have to do this and this and this. And in the process, we lose touch with the assurance of his care, and we panic, and we challenge the Lord himself on this. Can we reduce the stress of pressure of life by adopting a simpler lifestyle that makes room for listening to Jesus and to others? Listening is a great characteristic. Can the church jealously guard against programs crowding out listening? And again, I say pray for your leaders. Now, slide 19, Jesus answers her challenge with pointing out to her problem and then making this wonderful statement. Mary has chosen what is better. Today she has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Chosen is an interesting word. It's the same word that's used often in the New Testament for before the foundation of the world, chosen and so forth. Same word. Picked out what she desires, and it's better. It's better in the sense of it's good, it's useful, it's profitable, it's advantageous for promoting welfare. There's still expansions of what the word means. She's chosen what is better. We are constantly faced with choice of what we will give our attention to and who we will listen to today in this world. Jesus says she made the choice. And when you stop and think about what does she get from being drawn closer to Jesus? What does she get from the knowledge of God that he shares with her? She gets things that can't be taken away. So often we go and we listen and we choose things, and they're all things that will be taken away sooner or later. But Jesus says what she's getting in relationship with me and with the Father cannot be taken away. It's permanent reward. So listening to Jesus has the power to prevent stress, actually, bring peace, producing knowledge of him, and increase fruitfulness in him. All these things will take place in their right order if we stop to listen. And I think Jesus enjoyed her listening because Jesus was used to a lot of people who didn't listen. The religious leaders of the day, their ears were blocked by their legalism and their pride. And so he would say wonderful eternal things in their presence and have it fall to the dust. Now Jesus took on our humanity. I'm sure he felt that. But as the Son of God, he felt it even more. That people who are headed for a lost eternity were not picking up, not hearing what he said. So when he has someone that comes and sits at his feet and listens from the heart, listening to his heart. What a blessing that would be for him. Can you identify that? You can identify that, Pastor John, can't you? When people are ready to listen. Wonderful. The result of listening to Jesus cannot be taken away even by terrorists. Take it with you. Belonging to him, his rewards that can't be taken away. Nothing, no one can take them away. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Lord God, we thank you for your long suffering and patience. I thank you for it, that you keep speaking to me even when I have rejected, ignored, become indifferent. And every time I come to sit at his feet, my favourite place of listening, in your word, you speak faithfully and clearly. So we pray for each other this morning, the conviction of your Spirit and the strengthening of your Spirit to be listeners and to be doers of what we hear. For Jesus' sake, amen.